Hello, I'm Charlene Tait, Director of Development for Scottish Autism, and I'm joined by Dr. Catriona Stewart. Welcome, Catriona. The focus of your research has been girls and women who are autistic, and you're sharing a range of findings with us in more extended interviews. Just now we're just going to have a bit of a chat about your findings around education.
Okay.
And of course, education is a very broad spectrum from primary school right through to secondary school, further and higher education. So what would you say were the key things that you found from the women who were involved in your study?
Okay. One of the key things, very, very, very important, is the actual physical environment of schools, universities. I mean, obviously it goes into the workplace, but in terms of education, the actual physical environment of the schools in themselves could be really challenging for the children, for the girls, making it very difficult for them to study. What we're talking about really is the sensory input, which has recently been put into the new diagnostic manual. DSM-5 actually includes sensory issues, which I'm really delighted to see, because people think of it as a kind of, oh, they're slightly sensitive to sounds or whatever, but it's actually much, much, much more important than that. It's much more pervasive. It does impact hugely on students' ability to focus. And it also can cause an awful lot of stress and anxiety if they're constantly being assaulted by overwhelming sounds, having their chairs kicked, having things thrown at them while they're trying to pay attention to the teacher, that kind of thing. Lighting can be a problem.
So it's a real barrier to learning.
It is.
Even for people who are very able to learn, those issues can cause a real barrier for them.
Well, absolutely. We talk about a spiky profile in autism, and that is one of the issues, isn't it? That even very able students, very able people can actually have great difficulty functioning in the neurotypical social environment, and of course schools, that's what school is.
Yes.
So yeah, a very, very able pupil can still have difficulty staying in school, can get poor grades, because of stress and anxiety certainly, but yeah, the difficulty in paying attention and focusing because of the environment.
So there's the learning environment, and then, as you just said, school is very much a social environment. So what were the experiences of girls within the school social environment?
Well, there's a lot of bullying does go on, as we know, and being marginalised and excluded. And one of the reasons why girls on the spectrum tend not to be picked up so early is that they may well be very much the quiet, well-behaved girl in the corner that doesn't really trouble anyone, or certainly doesn't trouble the teacher, so they don't get noticed, but in fact they're really quietly very, very lonely and very isolated, which in itself can be a barrier to learning. But some of these young people are really targeted and really very badly bullied, and if they're not bullied, they're left out of things, and that has a huge impact on them, both in terms of their self-esteem and in terms of their learning, because young people learn a lot from each other when they're in groups, and if you're not part of that group, then you're missing out on a whole area of kind of peer mediated learning, if you like.
Did any of the people who participated in your study give any good examples, positive examples of things that had helped them at school?
I think where there is a greater awareness and staff training is at a good standard, and awareness. It's a combination of awareness, but also that awareness has to be allied with acceptance and a true knowledge of, what has to be put into place. There are one or two initiatives springing up. There's one in East Renfrewshire which was developed, rolled out. It's an after-school club for girls, Asperger's girls, and girls from all over the local authority were kind of taxied over to this after-school club. And it's a very early start, if you like. It's kind of wee pilot, but at least it's a start. We certainly have had a lot of adult women and parents saying yes, they would like to see all sorts of things put in place for girls. We're not really there yet, but things like really good career advice, for example, peer support schemes, advice and support for life skills, that kind of thing. But ultimately, it's about raising awareness. It's raising awareness about some of the really simple, straightforward things that could be put in place, such as if there's a high standard of staff training and understanding, then just even the use of language could make a big difference. So, for example, one of the participants in one of my earlier studies told a little story, which was really quite poignant, about having spent an entire lesson sitting staring at the blackboard because the teacher had said, okay, here, written up 6 questions on the blackboard I'd like you to answer. Just do them in any order you like. And this girl, 15-year-old, very able girl, had spent the entire lesson trying to work out where to start. So just something as simple as saying, if you don't know which order to do them in, start at number 1 and make your way through to number 6 would be really easy and would help a lot. Or not using language like, you might like to read this book at home. Explicit instructions, because of course the girl didn't read it at home because she didn't want to and she didn't like to. But saying, I would like you to read this book at home by the end of March. You know, just very explicit.
So easy things to do that don't cost any money, but they need a lot of understanding and thoughtfulness really on the part of education staff.
Yes.
And of course within the school day there are lots of little transitions, but there are a lot of major transitions around education, moving from primary to secondary, and then out, and then of course what do you do once you have your university degree, that sort of thing. What were some of the key findings around transition experiences for the women and girls in your study? Well,
we do know, don't we, that transitions can be really challenging for young people, well, for people on the spectrum overall. Certainly the transition from primary to secondary school is a huge one for the girls, and that's one of the times that they're more likely to start running into serious difficulties. Leaving school to go to university, well, there's actually a lot more attention being paid to that as well just now, which is good. Very capable students who've maybe made it through school with a good set of exams have gone on to higher education. We don't have the statistics. We don't actually know what happens to a lot of these young people. What has become more and more apparent over the last few years is that probably too many of them are actually dropping out. And it can be things such as not actually knowing your way about campus, and having great difficulty getting organised to get up in the morning, get out, go to the lecture, and it all becomes so difficult and too scary, and students end up spending too much time sitting in their room missing lectures. So again, we're talking about greater awareness. We're talking about girls being picked up earlier so that they actually get coping strategies to put into place. We're talking about the need for peer support. That's been mentioned a lot. We're talking about really some quite, as we said earlier, really quite simple and not resource heavy adjustments and supporting strategies being put in place. The big thing about transitions is just to really make sure that the individual has a chance to think through what's happening, what's going to happen next, maybe go and look at the location, whether it's a secondary school or whether it's a university or a sixth form college or whatever, that they actually have a chance to have a look at it. Maybe even spend a few hours there, preferably even spend, if they're going away from home to go to university, for example, actually maybe spending a week there with a parent or a good friend, a sport. Getting used to the place.
Just the preparation thing, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Familiarisation and preparation. Yeah. And
of course, we're in a sort of culture now of lifelong learning, and you've got lots of opportunities to learn throughout your lifetime. Did you get any sense that autistic women tend to return to education later in life, or that they are more maybe interested and motivated in education later in life when they are maybe more in control of their choices and decisions? Was there anything around that?
Well, yes, there have been women who've described how they probably went in directions that weren't necessarily the ones that were going to end up most suiting them early in life, or feeling unable, you know, maybe leaving school not having a sense of their own abilities, and then beginning to realise later on in life that maybe they have those abilities. And one of the barriers to accessing education later on in life is for a lot of people, they think they can't afford it. So that would be one of the things to put in place, is make sure that information is readily accessible. Autism is a developmental difference. It's a developmental thing, and so there's always room to change and grow and to learn. And yes, I think it's not uncommon for women on the spectrum to realise later in life that they have all sorts of capacities and abilities that they could do something about.
So I guess an important thing for maybe younger women who are not finding the education system so comfortable at the moment, that it's not a one-off deal, is a good message for them, that, you know, that maybe you can return to this later on, maybe a bit more on your own terms, if school or further education isn't quite working out for you just now. It doesn't mean that that's the end of the road for you in terms of your education.
Absolutely. And one of the things which is very understandable for parents of girls, when they get anxious about what they perceive their children's they're not achieving some of the milestones that they would like to see, because that would give them assurance that their girls are going to be okay as they get older. So they get very sort of concerned about the lack of peer group friendship circles or whatever. I would really, really urge, and this was something that a number of the participants in our research have stressed as well, is really the importance of supporting these girls being themselves, playing to their strengths, focusing on their special interests, encouraging them if they have a particular area of academia, or even if it's not academia, any particular area of interest that could potentially be used to develop their self-confidence and self-esteem, because it is a developmental issue. These girls will develop at different times to perhaps a lot of their neurotypical peers, but if you give them that support and being themselves, then they're more likely to grow up to be adults who are actually doing something that they're both good at and that they can enjoy and that suits them. And things like groups of friends will come later when they meet other people like them who have similar interests, or they won't. They may not ever end up having a lot of friends, but they may well end up working in an area that really, really suits them. So it's about encouraging them to find their niche, really, in life.
Okay, well, I think that's a really positive note to end this little section on. And of course, there is a much more detailed presentation around education also in the programme. So thank you, Catriona.
Thanks, Charlene.